everybody. Thanks for tuning in today. We've got the Season 6 Draft on tap. Now, for those that weren't tracking along earlier today, we've had quite the roller coasters of trades going on, especially in the first round. Earlier in the week, the Vandals traded up to 2. Earlier in the season, the Crabs traded away their first round pick to the Scorpions, and then today we've had kind of a three-way deal between the Sloths, Voyagers, and Scorpions. The Scorpions are now drafting at 1 and 5, Sloths now at 3, and Voyagers at 4. The Voyagers had won the lotto. They were set to be drafting first. However, they traded out of that position with the Sloths, so they took the Sloths' 4th pick. Sloths then traded down with the Scorpions, who were projected to be 3, now at 1. And as mentioned earlier, Vancouver Vandals traded up to 2, and that was with the Aviators, who are now drafting 6th. And the Scorpions still have the 5th overall pick in the draft, and that was originally held by the Crabs. So we're all now waiting for the first pick in the draft. There were a lot of mocks going around today, especially once trades started hitting the fan. I'm excited to see where things end up going. I'll go ahead and pull up some mock drafts now and see what players had a tendency of being on there. We'll go ahead and get the draft underway. The first pick is in, and without any more delay, I think a lot of people were on to it since the trade. And if you had Speedy Boy going first overall to the Scorpions, you are correct. Speedy Boy, he spent some time with the Swifties last season. He won a minor league World Series with them. He's a left-handed speedster. He's all about the speed. He's a fast outfielder, fast batter. There's still some discussion on what position he'll end up playing once he gets to the majors, but rumor has it he'll be starting off in the minors. So he'll have another season with the Swifties. He'll be looking to get another World Series ring, I'm sure, before he ends up playing for the Scorpions. And just like that, the second pick is in. The Vandals are in an interesting situation. They're drafting second again this year after winning the World Series just like last year. Last draft they had taken a relief pitcher, a closer, and Chris Bennett. And it looks like they grabbed him just before they needed him, as they lost 2 closers to free agency this year. And it looks like they'll be trying to stay ahead of the curve again this year, as there's some concerns of them losing a key player in Ishikawa. They've drafted Huki Hawaii, a switch hitter, right-handed thrower, catcher. And on the clock now is the San Antonio Sloths. If my understanding of all the hype and the draft picks before were correct, it sounds like the Sloths helped spearhead the 3-way trade at the top of the first round that we experienced today. So it's interesting to see what their idea, what their plan was, going from 4 to 1 to 3. Essentially, they really just jumped the Voyagers because they're still drafting after the Scorpions. They're still drafting after the Vandals, but now the Voyagers are behind them in the draft, and that's kind of all it seemed like it was to me. But obviously, everybody agreed. They had a plan in place, and it sounds like it worked out for them. The pick is in. They're taking a pitcher, a right-handed finessed closer in Adam Squigley. He's a righty. Finesse closer. Last draft we had another pitcher go high, finesse closer. And this time around it is Adam Squigley. The Sloths do have a hole on their rosters for a closer. It'll be interesting to see if he gets playing time right away or if they'll give him some time to develop in the minors. The Voyagers are on the clock now. They've got the 4th pick in the draft. Where was I going with this? The Voyagers killed the draft last year. They had great picks. They led things off with Borthwell, and they were able to grab Piazza at 5. I believe in the 3rd round they drafted the Rookie of the Year, Ludwig Groetzker, who fell all the way down to the 3rd round. Great draft by the Voyagers. They're hoping to do it again this year. They had the opportunity to pick first again this year. They won the lottery despite being the second to last team. Sorry, I'm getting pinged a few times on Discord right now, so my attention's a little anyways, so the pick is in for the Voyagers, and they're addressing a need with starting pitcher. They definitely have the potential to go the distance, and they're hoping that this pitcher can help turn things around. They had a great pick in Ryan Stryker, and now they'll have Lucas North joining the franchise. He's a left-handed batter, right-handed pitcher. Another finesse pitcher drafted in the 1st round. So that brings things to Death Valley. This is a team that finished, if I recall correctly, 49-51. And part of that was because they traded away Paulo DeStefano, which gave them this pick. And Paulo has since re-signed with the Scorpions, so they've got a great opportunity here to sacrifice, run for the championship this season. They got their player back. They got a pick out of it, a few picks actually. A lot of people considered that to be a fleece that the Crabs had overpaid, and we've got a little bit of a biased view now, as we know the Crabs didn't end up winning at all, but I think history would have been written differently had they won. And the Scorpions are a team that doesn't have a whole lot of holes. They kind of have a crowded outfield now, actually, especially after Speedy Boy. And Buck Shank's a phenomenal shortstop. They've got Ziggy Coffey at first. They don't have a lot of holes offensively. I imagine they'll be going with a pitcher here. There's not a ton of relief pitchers in this draft, so I imagine they'll try to get a starter that they want right away. instead of waiting and letting them fall and then just hoping to get one that you kind of like. I think they'll try to address a hole that they have and get one that they like a lot right away. And the pick is in. They'll be taking left-handed balanced pitcher out of J.P. Stevens High School, the 17-year-old lefty, Damian Wallach. .6'6", 16 years old in the game, 17 years old on his player card on the forum, so he should have a nice long career ahead of him. And quite the height on a kid that young. Every team, I think, needs a good, tall, power lefty, and while he isn't a power pitcher, he can definitely be a powerful pitcher for the team. OBX is on the board now. They ended up with the Vandals pick after trading away their second and swapping firsts in a deal that sent John Smoltz Jr. to Outer Banks. And let's see, pick is in already. They're going with another starting pitcher, so that makes 3 in a row, if my count's correctly. Yes, 3 starting pitchers in a row and a closer before that. So of the first 6 players selected, all 6 in the first round, 4 of them have been pitchers, and just one of which has been a closer. I won't stall too much longer with the Outer Banks selection. They're taking someone who joined a little late in the prospect tournament series going on. They're taking a righty. He's a balanced pitcher, and he's named after what he wants to be. It's Ace Faulkner, hoping to be the ace for Outer Banks. Standing 6'3", 205 pounds. Got too much stuff open. Ace Faulkner's out of Rochester in New Hampshire. He's a balanced pitcher. He runs fastball, knuckle, curve, and slider. And we're now in the second round. It's time to mix up the order just due to the amount of trades that occurred. Vandals are drafting first in the second, followed by the Voyagers, followed by the Scorpions, followed by Sloths, Scorpions again, and the Vandals. So the second round is now underway. For those that did not catch the first round, if you're just now tuning in or you tuned in a little late, the draft thus far, Death Valley grabbed Speedy Boy, first pick. They traded up to get him. The Vandals, after trading away John Smoltz Jr., ended up with the second pick, and they grab a catcher in Huki, Hawaii. Sloss, after a 3-way trade that sent the Voyagers to the 4, Scorpions to 1, and themselves to the 3, grab closer Adam Squigley. The Voyagers, with the 4th pick, grabbed Lucas North. The Scorpions, with their second pick in the first round, grabbed Damian Wallach. And Outer Banks, with the 3rd starting pitcher in the draft, they selected Ace Faulkner. And the pick is already in for the Vandals at 7th. They're addressing a hole that became a problem um, this offseason, and that's closer. They are grabbing Mason Brown, 7th overall. He's a closer, 6'2", 210 pounds. He's 19 years old. He's a righty. And the Voyagers are now on the clock. Mason Brown out of Minnesota State University. Velocity in the 88 to 90 range. Fastball, changeup, sinker combo. He's a balanced pitcher. So the last 5, is that correct? 5 picks in the draft have all been pitchers. And the Voyagers now on the clock. We'll go ahead and look at their roster. They've addressed starting pitching twice now this offseason by signing Darnell Turner and drafting North. They've got an excellent young closer in Ludwig Groetzker. So I imagine they'll be going with a positional player. It's hard to tell where they'll be drafting, though. They've got talented players everywhere. Last year they drafted a third baseman in Weldon Borthwell. Clem Johnson's a young, promising shortstop. George Delrod is a talented second baseman. So maybe they go outfield. They had just signed Hawk Russell, so and Pepe Alazar was a Silver Slugger and a Gold Glove Award winner, so they don't necessarily have a lot of holes on this roster. They're young. They've got a lot of upside. I think they've got what it takes to be a legitimate contender. Maybe not this year, but 2, 3, 4 years at the latest. The Voyagers are going to be a force to be reckoned with if they continue to draft as they did last year. And I think North was a great pick for them earlier. I think the ability that they had to trade down and still get who I think they wanted as their starting pitcher of the future, I think that worked out great for the Voyagers. And their pick is in, and I'm a little bit surprised by this, actually. As I mentioned before, they had drafted a third baseman first overall this year, and they'll be doing so at 8th overall this year. They're taking George McBash. He's a third baseman. He's a righty, stands at 6'1", 185. A little more info on George McBash. He's out of Bellevue High School. He was recruited by their closer, Andrew Warren or Ludwig Groetzker, so it's not a surprise that they jump on him right away. I had interviewed him, and just for fun, getting my own mock drafts together, and just curious to see what young, promising players I hope to see in the minor leagues, and preferably the State College Swifties. But I was impressed by Isaac George McBash. I think he's going to be a great player. I'm not sure where they're going to play him right away. He could be a DH long term. Maybe they'll have Borthwell focus more on hitting and move Isaac into the third base role. I know, if I recall correctly, George McBash wanted to be a prominent defensive player. So it's possible that might be their route. I'm not really sure, but I like the pick. You can never have too much young, promising talent on your team, and I think they've got that in George McBash. And with the new rookie contract length in place, they're going to have him for 4 years instead of 3. So I have to imagine that he's going to be a part of the Voyager core that they have going forward. With the 9th overall pick in the draft, the Scorpions are on the board. We'll go ahead and take a look at their roster. They no longer have Knuckles Deep. He has retired and recreated, so they still have him for another year, but he is what he is now. They did already draft one starting pitcher. I don't know if they'll be drafting two. However, you know, back to you can't have too much talent. You can never have too many good starting pitchers. If you look at how successful the Voyagers, or I'm sorry, not the Voyagers, the Vandals have been, a lot of that boils down to having 4 ace pitchers in their rotation. They were able to sign Keith Shields, and they have Musgrave Smythe, so they've got some good relief pitchers. Keith Shields had a bit of an off year this year, I think. Hopefully he can turn things around here in Death Valley. They've drafted twice already, once grabbing Speedy Boy, who looks like a very promising pick. I know a lot of people aren't necessarily fans of the speedster archetype for hitting, but I think Speedy Boy's got what it takes to make that archetype work. He seems like a very active individual. I think he's going to be a great addition to this team. And I can tell you right now, pitchers that are in the Scorpions division, so Sloths and Vandals, if you're listening, you need to crank up hold runners, because Biggio, Coffey, and Boy are going to steal on you day in and day out. I mean, those 3 guys alone, I wouldn't be shocked if the Scorpions can put up 2 runs a game just from those 3 guys stealing home twice a game, every game. Obviously, that's a slight exaggeration, but it really isn't that far from the truth. If you have 3 people that can consistently steal their way into scoring position, and then you have guys like Paulo DeStefano and Buckshank, who are more than capable of picking up RBIs on the regular, and Minjun Du, this is going to be a very exciting offense, I think, to watch. And their pick is in. They are taking starting pitcher, so they are going with the pitcher route, trying to secure what they've got defensively, so their offense can click. They're taking a left-handed power pitcher. He stands in at 6'4". He throws a fastball, a curveball, and a screwball, and his name is Bobby Hill. Bobby Hill's velocity's not up there yet. He actually didn't dump any of his TPE into velocity when making his player. He addressed the poor control, and he improved his movement. So it'll be interesting to see how that works out. The Scorpions could possibly throw him right into the Major League lineup, but I wouldn't be shocked to see power starting pitcher spend some time in the minors with how rough that control can be. You're going to give up a lot of walks, but he dumped and improved in movement, so I wouldn't be surprised if he's a type of pitcher that can walk the bases loaded, doesn't give up the grand slam, and just strikes out the next 3 batters and gets out of a lot of jams. So it'll be interesting to see how Bobby Hill develops. And on the clock now is the Sloths. And I've got a nice little sneak peek into the war rooms of each team, and there's actually some trade talk going on for this pick, so it'll be interesting to see how this goes. Wow, I'm reading the trade that just went through, and I'm not sure I can believe what I'm reading. But but they did it. So uh, Bobby Hill is already changing teams. The trade that the Sloths just pulled, uh, they're taking Hill, who was just drafted, the pick before them, and they're taking a 4th round pick from Death Valley next year. And in return, they're giving Death Valley this pick, and they're giving them a 3rd round pick next year. So the Scorpions are getting a lot of picks this draft, and I'm thinking if I just swap the Sloths around with the Scorpions here, hopefully it doesn't screw anything up, but I guess we'll find out. And it still shows the Scorpions took Bobby Hill, so we'll just have to, I guess we can change that now. Bobby Hill, that has to be the fastest trade for a single player in their career. He was on the roster for 0 seconds. He hasn't even signed his contract yet, and he's already been traded. So, very, very interesting move by the Scorpions. I don't know. Maybe they just felt like getting some extra picks. They must have a lot of fun saying which player gets drafted next. So, the Scorpions will technically make 3 consecutive picks this draft, this round. So Scorpions now just traded their 9th pick for the 10th pick, and then swapped some future picks around next year. So they took a starting pitcher a second ago. I imagine they've got a starting pitcher they like about the same if they were willing to give up the last one so quick, and they get a 3rd round pick out of it next year, and they give up a 4th round pick next year. So they trade up next year. In return, they give away Bobby Hill for the next starting pitcher they're going to take. And that pick is in. They do officially announce they'll be taking a different starting pitcher. So it makes you wonder, if you're this starting pitcher, do you hold a little bit of a grudge knowing that they did pick somebody else before you? Or do you just let it go? You're just happy to be picked? I don't know, but we'll have to ask them once we announce the pick. The right-handed 6'3" finesse pitcher Brett Smokey will be picked now. Brett Smokey, equipped with a fastball, a slider, and a curveball. Kentucky-born pitcher. So they take Brett Smokey. Once again, sorry for the long pauses. I'm getting a lot of pings from the draft board. Or from all the managers in the draft. It's a very hectic war room after that trade. The Scorpions on the board again now. So hopefully when they made this trade, they already knew who they were going to take with the 11th pick. I imagine they do, just because of a couple of rules in place. As I had mentioned earlier, Knuckles Deep retired and recreated, and he recreated to Ketolo Ketone, and the Scorpions are going to lock into the left-handed hitter catcher, Ketolo Ketone, who was a promising catching prospect during the tournament. I'm excited to see what he brings, and I'm thinking with Death Valley and Vancouver in the same division, taking catchers fairly early in this draft, I think we could have a good position rivalry within the division between Ketolo Ketone and Huki Hawaii, so that'll be exciting to watch develop. And speaking of Vancouver, they are now on the board. Their last pick was Brown, a closer. So they're on the board now. This is the 12th. Yeah, 12th pick. This is the end of the second round. That trade really screwed with my head, just in terms of ordering for everything. We'll go back over the draft log while we wait for the announcement. Anyway, so going back over the draft, the Scorpions have picked 5 times already, taking Speedy Boy, Damian Wallach, Bobby Hill, who they then immediately traded for basically Brett Smokey and a 3rd round pick next year at the cost of a 4th round pick the following. And then they've got who they hope to be the catcher of the future in Ketolo Ketone, which, by the way, is a great name. So we're at the end of the second. End of the second round now. We're waiting for Vancouver, who, because of a trade for, trade away of John Smoltz to Outer Banks, they were able to grab someone who they envision as their catcher of the future, assuming Ishikawa is not around for much longer as he's in a contract year. Hopefully for the Vandals, they can keep them both, and one can DH, or they can find another position for Hawaii. But if not, he definitely has what it takes to be a great catcher for them long term. They followed that up with closer Mason Brown, who, when I was actually interviewing him, threatened to take Chris Bennett's job as the #1 closer down the road, which I thought was a pretty good answer to the question I had asked. So I like the fire that I see in Mason Brown. Pun somewhat unintended, but ultimately all puns are intentional. So the Vandals have been able to answer to a couple of their potential holes. And their pick is in now. They're going to grab, oops, wrong spot. They're going to grab a second baseman, who I'm quite a fan of personally. The lefty second baseman, Leonard Church, is also played by my wife-to-be. So that works out quite well. So that's the end of the second. We'll go back over the draft log. Scorpions with Speedy Boy, Vandals with Hawaii, Sloths with Squiggly, Voyagers with North, Scorpions again with Wallach, Aviators with Faulkner. It sounded like a lot of people were actually able to get the mock draft 100% right. I know I was one of them, so that's pretty exciting. In the second round, the Vandals led things off with Mason Brown, followed by the Voyagers taking McBash. Then the Scorpions with 3 consecutive picks. Hill, who was traded, Smokey, and then Catone. And the Vandals ended things in the second round by taking Leonard Church. So we head to the third round now. We're going to go ahead and just review that trade just to make sure that there wasn't anything involved in S6, and there's not. I know I said earlier it was next year, but I just wanted to verify that before I went ahead and continued. So, leading things off here, in the third round of the draft, we've got the Aviators. Vandals up again. They had traded with the Sloths for this pick, if I recall correctly. That doesn't make sense. This must have been... I don't know how they ended up with this pick. I thought it was the Sloths. I don't know. There's been a lot of trades this week. It's hard to keep track of them all, to be honest. So we've got Sloths, following that Voyagers, Crabs, Aviators here in the third. So Aviators drafting at the start and end of the third round. So this must have been... No, that doesn't make sense either. I don't know. I have no idea how the picks got to where they were. As I mentioned, I think there's been at least 5 or 6 trades just this... I mean, 3 of them today. But just this end of the week alone for drafts. It's been a very memorable draft, I think. Just because of how many trades there were, especially every pick in the first round not belonging to its original owner. Every pick in the first round was traded. So we head into the third round now. And OBX leading things off here in the third. Voyagers and the Aviators looking for a quick turnaround after struggling a bit last year. The Aviators having a lot of success in acquiring existing players by signing McDonald and trading for Smoltz. They drafted Ace Faulkner at the end of the first round with the 6th overall pick. They did not have a pick in the second. However, they've got 2 picks here in the third, and their pick is in now. They're taking a center fielder. There's a few left, so I didn't blow it away quite yet. Center fielder from California, 6'2". He's a righty, both throwing and batting. He's a balanced hitter and a balanced outfielder, and that man is Kellen Buchanan. So we move on to the Vandals pick now. And not sure where they're gonna go with this pick. They've got a lot of options coming off of a World Series win. They still have a great core, but they're going to be relying on some new players now, and more so going forward. They've lost McDonald, who led their team not only in WAR but in batting average, and was second in stolen bases for the team. And if I recall correctly, he was their leadoff hitter for the World Series, either against left or right-handed pitchers. So not only that, but they also traded away a closer. So their bullpen now is down to 3. So I imagine they'll grab a pitcher here. Both closers are off the board, so they're probably gonna try to grab a starter that they know could convert to the pen or would be okay pitching out of the pen for a while. And they're going to grab starting pitcher. Out of Texas A&M, tall left-handed finesse pitcher with a fastball, cutter, and slider, and that's Michael Oxhart. The Sloths now on the board. They've got not really any holes on their team. They were able to draft a closer. Their pitching staff isn't phenomenal, but it's good, and they'll get better over time. So I imagine they'll go with a hitter here. There were rumors that when they were trading up, it was actually to grab Hawaii before the Vandals would get him, and I don't know how much of that was just Vandal paranoia and how much legitimacy was in that concern. So I wouldn't be surprised to see him grab either a catcher, someone who'd be willing to play backup catcher, or DH for them. They've got a young, talented catcher, great power hitter. Obviously, he's no Julian O'Sullivan, but he's still got time to get there. And their pick is in, and it's actually someone who fell a lot further than I thought they would, just due to the position. It is indeed a catcher, so that narrows it down to the remaining one, Refugio Castro. He's 5'10", he's a lefty and throws lefty, which is somewhat rare for a catcher. He's a react catcher, so he's built similar to Buster Posey, and he's a power hitter, so he'll be looking to tack on some more home run blasts for the Sloths. So they'll have 2 power hitting catchers now. I imagine one has a chance at becoming a DH one day, or maybe someone will be changing positions down the road. The Voyagers are on the clock now. So just to recap, we're halfway through the third. The Aviators grabbed a center fielder in Kellen Buchanan. Vandals grab starting pitcher in Michael Oxhart. And the Sloths select a catcher, Refugio Castro. I'm being told now from Sloths manager herself that it was 100% paranoia before. They had no intentions of moving up to 1 to draft a catcher. But I'm still not surprised to see him take a catcher here. I thought Castro had some good potential to him. Not surprised to see him taken at this spot in the draft. I kind of expected him to go sooner, but with the amount of catchers that came out of last draft, it's not surprising to see him fall to the middle of the third. And the Voyagers now, we'll go back over their lineup. They've got what? Well, their roster got screwed up as Piazza's not in it. So somewhere Piazza is in there. I can't imagine they benched him. But they've still got Laddie McBantershire, who is, I think he heavily favors right-handed hitting. Yeah, so he's a righty dominant batter, and generally DH for them is Piazza as their catcher. They've got a great center field there. I know they're a big fan of Clem Johnson, so their next pick might be another pitcher. I don't really know what they'll do with this pick here. There's nothing wrong with grabbing another pitcher to help solidify the bullpen, or just to add another starting pitcher prospect, getting them in your minors and hoping that they're ready to go in a year or two. Their pick is in, and it does surprise me a little bit. They're grabbing a middle infielder who did quite well during the prospect tournament. I don't think it's a bad pick, but it is a little bit of a surprise for me to see them take it. But again, you can never have too much talent. They're grabbing a righty second baseman, quick infielder, contact hitter, just like the second baseman drafted before him, and that's Louis Storm. He had a great prospect tournament, and he looks like a very promising player. Well-rounded defensively, well-rounded offensively. So, yeah, I think he'll be a good player. I don't know where he'll fit in their organization, but I'm sure they're happy to have him. And the Crabs, for the first time in the draft, are up now. And to be honest, they've been off the board for so long that I don't even remember what their lineup looks like. So we'll go back over it. De Niro, great shortstop. Keeks Marone, if I recall correctly, was a Gold Glove left fielder and unanimously second in Silver Slugging. Columbus, Mike Boss, who was our Home Run Derby champ. Stanton, Jackson, Matthew Valentine, Michael Rapinski. I think one reason why I thought the catchers would be off the board sooner was I had forgotten the Crabs did not draft until this spot here in the third round with the 5th pick. Jackson's not a bad catcher, but he's not as active as you'd want a player to be. Obviously, you'd want every player you have to be as active as possible, and the Crabs are fresh out of catching options, so they might grab an infielder if they know they're willing to convert to catcher. But otherwise, they don't really have any glaring weaknesses in their lineup. They could get another DH. I'm sure they've actually got one other than Billy Bates, but maybe they don't. And they've got a phenomenal bullpen now with Penny Cowers and Borkman and Pete Rose. Those three alone, head and shoulders as a group above any other bullpen in the league. So I can't imagine them grabbing a pitcher. They've got Tyler Oles, who finished in 3rd for Rookie of the Year this year. They got Castillo, Koufax, and Woozy, all good pitchers. If your worst pitcher is still a good pitcher, I don't think they'll grab one with their first pick. So I imagine they're going to grab a hitter of some sort. I don't know what position though. We'll see once the pick is in. And just like that, the pick is in. They are grabbing an infielder. This player tore it up the second day of streams. And I think he had a pretty good outing on the first day of streams as well. I'm getting an error trying to link you the right way. That's something that'll have to be fixed. But in the meantime, pick is in. We'll go back to the game screen and we'll just read you off some stats from here. They're taking Justin Moreland, who's a righty, third baseman primarily, 6'2", 195. He's just barely shy of 16 years of age. So between, for the most part, a very solid Crabs offense, and him only being 16, I imagine he'll spend some time in the minors. But you never know. Sometimes you can throw a player right in the fire and they'll surprise you with the result. So I wouldn't be too surprised to see him DHing right away, but I think they'll give him some time in the minors to develop first. And the Aviators on the board, or on the clock now. This is the final round of the third, and they'll be on it again immediately after with the first pick of the fourth round. And they announce both picks at the same time, but before I get ahead of myself, we'll go over the first one first. They grab a center fielder who impressed me defensively during the stream, and that's Jimmy Caliburn, center fielder. He's a righty, speed outfielder, contact hitter, so he's a young Ichiro potentially. He's out of Vanderbilt, and he was born in Chicago, so it's nice to see the Midwest well represented here with this pick. And their second pick was announced, as I mentioned, the same time. It's another outfielder. There's still a few left, so I can say that without blowing it. Out of the University of British Columbia, left-handed batter, right-handed thrower, left fielder, 6'2", 195. He was born in Vancouver. Oh, we gotta fix the draft order here. So in the fourth round of the draft, things will go Aviators, Voyagers, Crabs, Scorpions, and that'll actually end the fourth. However, due to the soft salary cap penalties for the Crabs and the Vandals, they will not be picking at 5 or 6. We'll head straight into the fifth round at that point, where the Aviators and the Voyagers will be picking. So I suppose technically our fourth round looks like Aviators, Voyagers, Crabs, Scorpions, Aviators, Voyagers. So Aviators, with their left fielder, they're taking Jordan Von Matt, Vancouver-born left fielder. I'm sure they're happy to see him not end up in his hometown team, and I'm sure they're happy to have him on their team along with another great outfielder. They've got a promising young outfield now. So Voyagers are on the board now. After two great picks from the Aviators. I'm enjoying some war room banter between the GMs. A lot of acknowledgement for the Caliburn and Von Matt picks being great calls. So the Voyagers now, we'll go back over their draft history as we're nearing the end of the draft. The Voyagers selected Lucas North in the first after trading down from 1 to 4. They followed that pick with George McBash, third baseman, and they followed that pick with Louis Storm. So thus far, I like what they've done. I think they'll grab another pitcher. This draft was very deep in pitching, and I think the Voyagers have enough young positional players where it doesn't make a lot of sense for them to be picking up pieces that they already have young, optimistic outcomes of. So I don't see them taking. I was surprised to see him take another third baseman. So I'd be very surprised to see him take Eddie Spaghetti. Ben Waters, I'm surprised is still on the board after how well he has done in the minor league. I know he's kind of fallen off a little bit, but surprised to see him be on the board still at this point. So yeah, there's still 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 pitchers, one of which was made today. That was Martinez Pedro, and Tiddlywink McTicklestick was created in time to be on the Swifties lineup for all of 5 seconds before being called up by the Aviators, and he was relief pitching for them at that point. And the pick is in for the Voyagers. They are taking a starting pitcher. He didn't have the best of outings during the prospect tournament, but you can't put too much stock in those, as it just shows where they're at now, not where they'll be. And they are fans of who they have now with Jaron Maxon. He's a right-handed power pitcher. His velocity is already in the mid-90s, 93, 95. He throws a fastball, a screwball, and a sinker. Again, power pitcher, so low starting control. He put a little bit of his initial funds into that, but he mostly addressed his stamina, velocity, and fastball. So he'll be another high walk concern, but he definitely has the tools to get himself out of the jams. Crabs on the clock now. Again, I don't see him taking a pitcher, so I imagine it'll be a positional player. We'll look at their lineup again and see what they have. Yeah, I don't see them replacing Mike Boss. I think Justin Moreland is going to be a new DH. King Swamp Troll, I don't even know if he's active anymore. I think he may have fallen off the face of the earth or turned back to his swamps. So they could take an outfielder here, but there's no telling for sure. Their draft is in. They are taking an outfielder. He is out of Rutgers University, switch hitting center fielder Phil Blunt, standing at 6'2", 230, out of Trenton, New Jersey, so close to a hometown kid, being able to play for Providence Crabs. And the Scorpions are now on the clock. And after that pick was announced, I was able to get a peek of the Scorpions' war room, and they took a deep collective sigh. This was certainly not the way they wanted that to go. So So they're not able to get Phil Blunt now. While we wait for that pick, we'll go back over the draft log. I think at this point the edge of the draft, I like what the Voyagers have done. I like what the Scorpions have done. The Aviators have made good picks, but just because of where they were at in the draft, they haven't been able to make great ones, in my opinion. I don't think that means the players won't become great, but it just doesn't, in terms of potential, I don't think they stack up. I think the Vandals have done a good job addressing some needs that they have, or potential needs, before it's a problem, so that's good forward thinking by them. The Sloths were able to, at least I imagine they were part of that spearheading of that weird three-way trade in the first round, so they were able to trade up, trade back down, and gather some additional picks, and they picked up a closer out of it that they wanted. Just one of two natural closers in the draft. And the next closer drafted was at the top of the second round. So if you needed a closer at this point, after the 7th pick in the draft, you were hoping that you'd get a starting pitcher to convert for you. So still waiting on words of the draft. And their pick is in. They grabbed someone who struggled in the prospect draft. He's also a rarity. I was surprised to see this position so under stocked, so to speak, for this draft. And that is shortstop Jimothy Kekton. Only shortstop in the draft, surprisingly. He's a switch hitting batter, speed demon, and balanced infielder. Let's see, very well-rounded infielder. Good range, good error, good arm. His turn double play is not very high yet, but it's still good. And then hitting wise, he's definitely building himself around. It looks like getting extra base hits and making the most of it with how fast he is. So once he starts getting on base more and he starts turning at bats into actual base hits, he'll definitely see those. He'll definitely see those numbers skyrocket. So that was technically the first pick of the, or no, that was technically the last pick of the 4th round. So we're now on to Aviators and Voyagers. This is the 5th round. So deep draft. We're starting to get towards the end of it. Still some players left. 3 infielders, a couple outfielders, and 4 starting pitchers. I see Tiddlywink is considered a relief pitcher, but he was moved to the bullpen with the Aviators. I do believe he's a starting pitcher. Aviators able to make another pick. GMs are applauding them for calling it a steal, and I am surprised he fell this far. The name alone, I thought, made him a high-quality prospect, and that's Eddie Spaghetti, 5'10", 205. He's a righty, third baseman. Yeah, surprised to see him go so late in the draft despite other third basemen going early. I thought he was on a similar tier as some of the others, but here he is being drafted at the end of the 4th round, or start of the 5th round, out of Boston College, born in Boston, Massachusetts. He's a balanced infielder, balanced batter, so he doesn't have any strong favorite tendencies. Right away he did dump into gap looking to get those extra base hits, and he did dump into errors just to make sure he keeps those at a minimum, because it's acceptable to not be able to get the throw off to first base in time, but it's not acceptable to throw it into the stands. So Voyagers on the board now. This is the 26th pick in the draft. At this point, I think the Voyagers might just be drafting for insurance. If they go with a batting player, if they grab a pitcher, I think they might just be trying to help promote and solidify a good bullpen. And their pick is in already for the 26th pick. I think they were just waiting to get their opportunity now, and they do. They grab another understaffed position here this draft out of Baltimore, Maryland, and Maryland University. They grab the left-handed, left-batting first baseman Chase Preza, setting at 6'1", just 165. He is a quick infielder, so you're going to have some very impressive range out of your first baseman, and he's a speed demon. So a few speed demons in this class now. It'll be very interesting to see how that shapes pitchers going forward with prioritizing hold runners. And that ends that round technically, so, or in game that ends that round. In reality, we're in the middle of the 5th round. Scorpions, Voyagers once more, followed by the Crabs, Vandals, and then following the Vandals pick, we go to the Aviators and Voyagers again. So Death Valley due up now for the 27th pick of the draft. I think they're in a situation now where they'll probably be grabbing a pitcher. And they do. I am surprised to see the announcement, not of the draft itself, but of the player. Just created today. They're grabbing Martinez Pedro. I was surprised to see somebody created on draft day, just hours before the draft. He was recruited by a Scorpion, so how much of that was intentional, try to sneak him buying in, or if it was just a last second, hey, I got this cool thing going on, draft today, get in or you'll miss out for a season. So Martinez Pedro is a balanced pitcher, but out of the gates spent a lot of His immediate TPE and velocity, 95 of 100 points went into Pedro's velocity. He's equipped with a fastball, a knuckle curve, and a slider. So, lefty starting pitchers off the board. Now that leaves us with just two lefty pitchers, one righty pitcher, a right fielder, a left fielder, and a second baseman. We've got three starting pitchers, a second baseman, a left fielder, and a right fielder on the board now. Voyagers pick. So while we wait for the Voyagers pick, we'll go back over the draft. We've got, we'll go by team. We'll start with the Scorpions as they've made the most picks. They started things off with Speedy Boy and followed that up with Damian Wallach. They then drafted Bobby Hill, who immediately got flipped to the Sloths. And the Scorpions drafted two more times, taking Brett Smokey and Catolo Catone. Then moving on, the Scorpions without a pick in the third, and then getting Jimothy Kekton in the fourth, and fresh out of player creation, Martinez Pedro here in the fifth. The Vandals addressed a potential hole at catcher down the road with Yuki Hawaii. They followed that pick with Mason Brown, a closer. They then took Leonard Church, second baseman, and they took Michael Oxhart in the third round. Their fourth round pick was void as they spent over the soft cap a little bit too much. And we're into the fifth round now. The Sloths grabbed Adam Squigley with the third pick in the draft after starting at 4, trading up to 1, and trading down to 3. They were without a second pick in the draft by trading away the 10th overall pick for the 9th overall drafted player in Bobby Hill. And then they exchanged draft picks next year, third and fourth round picks, if I recall correctly. So after picking up Bobby Hill in a trade and giving the Scorpions the ability to draft Brett Smokey, the Sloths grabbed the third of 3 catchers in Refugio Castro, and they were without a pick in the fourth round as well. The Voyagers have seemingly put together another solid draft, as they did last year, taking Lucas North 4th overall, following that pick with George McBash, Louis Storm, Jaron Maxon, and Chase Preza. It's hard to see where everybody will fit right now, but I think the Voyagers are at a point now where they have enough, I don't want to necessarily say depth, but they have enough players where these players can now get time to play and develop in the minor leagues, as they have players who are developing themselves in the majors, and I doubt they want to split a lot of playing time between the two. The pick is in, and as we're getting late in the draft now, running out of things to talk about, we'll jump right in. They're going to grab a player who had an opportunity to play in the minors but got called up before he had his chance. And that man is Tiddlywink McTicklestick. He spent some time relieving for OBX after having a few rough outings as a starter. So it'll be interesting to see if they move the power starting righty back to a starting role, or if they move him to the pen. He is equipped with a slider and a forkball. So that puts the Crabs on the clock. We've got 2 left-handed starting pitchers remaining. We've got 2 righty bats and a lefty bat left. That's Aiden Broderick, Sydney Swing, Ben Waters, Lord Bumington, Cole Davenport, and Jax Hunter. Things slowing down in the war rooms as fewer and fewer players are left on the board. Ben Waters was a critical part of a Swifties World Series. I can't imagine he goes undrafted despite falling to an inactive period. I had talked to him since I was a part of the Swifties locker room and still am. He said he just had some personal stuff pop up. I'm not sure if he's been able to work through that and he'll be back and active or not. But for the time being of the players, I imagine he's probably the highest rated. And the Crabs pick is in. And they do indeed take Ben Waters here. He's a left-handed hitting second baseman, 5'10", 180 pounds, born in Montreal, Canada, but playing baseball at the collegiate level at LSU. He's a power hitter and a quick infielder. So the Vandals are on the board now. Just 4 players left. Not sure what they'll do here. They can pick between 2 lefty pitchers or 2 right-handed outfielders. Aiden Broderick, the right fielder. Sydney Swing, the left fielder. Where'd he go? Jax Hunter, a left-handed pitcher. And Lord Bumington, Cole Davenport, who I can't find. Ah, there he is. Aiden Broderick, he's out of Boston College. He was born in Middletown, New Jersey. He was recruited by a couple of Voyagers, so I imagine if he stays available, the Voyagers might take a jab at him in case he returns to activity. Moving on to Sydney Swing, left fielder, right-handed. He was recruited along with the football and baseball league merger. He was actually born in Australia. He's a balanced outfielder and a contact hitter. Jax Hunter. This is Davies' 4th recreate. This time he makes a starting pitcher, left-hander, power pitcher. And last but not least, Lord Bumington, Cole Davenport out of UCLA, recruited by Andrew Warren. So another tie to the Voyagers. Born in San Francisco, he stands in at 6'6", and he's a balanced pitcher. So it looks like Andrew Warren, aka Ludwig Groetzker, who was just a rookie last year, put in a lot of work recruiting players, and that's great to see. Unfortunately, those players are still available. And And there's no announcement on if anything's going to come or not. And the Vandals elect to pass with 4 players left. They decide that they are happy with the 4 players they selected, and they're just going to send this one along to the Aviators. Voyagers still follow them. And following that pick of the Voyagers is the Scorpions. And the Aviators are going to take Jax Hunter. That puts the Voyagers on the board. They've got a few players with ties to members already on their roster. I imagine they'll at least take a chance on one of them, if not both, if they're available. That's Cole Davenport and Aiden Broderick. And if they don't go that route, they'll take Sydney Swing or they'll pass. And it looks like things are stirring in the Voyagers war room. I think they have a pick to announce soon. Oh, I put him on the spot and I think he got nervous. So we've got a right-handed corner outfielder, and we've got a left-handed balanced starting pitcher to choose from. And they are going to pass. So that puts the Scorpions with a chance to do what they have done quite well so far this draft, and that's just pick basically anybody. Not to slight anyone they've selected, but they have made a ton of picks this draft, and they were hot, ready to go immediately, able to get that pick in. And following them will be the Aviators, should they so choose. The Scorpions will take Sydney Swing, left fielder. Remaining now is Aiden Broderick in right and Lord Bumington, starting pitcher. Aviators with an opportunity to grab one more person here before the 5th round ends in game. And should the Aviators pass, the Voyagers and the Scorpions will follow. Three options now. Left-handed pitcher, right-handed right fielder, or to do nothing at all. And the Aviators are going to pass. The Voyagers with an opportunity, I believe they get a chance. If not, it'll go to the Scorpions. So because the Voyagers have passed, they no longer get an opportunity here. So that goes to the Scorpions. And they will again not let the opportunity to draft somebody go to waste. They will take Lord Bumington Cole Davenport, the lefty, out of Boston College. So with one spot left, and we got to reset the draft order here. I believe the Sloths now with an opportunity to grab the last player. Should they choose not to, things go to the Crabs. And should they choose not to, we go back to the Scorpions. The Sloths will pass. So that gives the Crabs the opportunity to grab the last player in the draft, unless they passed earlier, which I don't believe they did. I don't think they had enough draft picks to pass on anybody anyways. The Crabs will pass, and that gives the Scorpions one more chance to make a pick. And they do announce they'll take Aiden Broderick. So Mr. Irrelevant is the right-handed right fielder, Aiden Broderick, out of Middletown, New Jersey. Went to Boston College. A lot of Boston College graduates here in this draft. So Death Valley with an opportunity to grab a lot of players, a lot of shots on goal. They have the potential to have a very talented team going forward if even half of these players pan out to be half as good as they hope them to be. So we'll go back over the draft one more time, and then I'll thank you for watching, and I'll disappear. So first pick of the draft was Speedy Boy, following a three-way trade that involved the Scorpions, the Sloths, and the Voyagers, that sent the Scorpions from 3 to 1, the Voyagers from 1 to 4, and the Sloths from 4 to 3. Following that, the Vandals selected Huki Hawaii. The Sloths grabbed Adam Squigley, one of two relief pitchers in the draft. The Voyagers grabbed Lucas North, the first starting pitcher. and the dominoes then fell. Death Valley grabbed a starting pitcher, Damian Wallach, followed by another starting pitcher, Ace Faulkner, going to the Aviators. The Vandals, not to be outdone by the teams before them, grab a pitcher themselves in Mason Brown, the second of two closers. The Voyagers played combo breaker and selected George McBash. Death Valley then made 3 consecutive picks, trading away their first one. They selected Bobby Hill, who then got traded to the Sloths for the 10th pick in the draft, and trading up from 4th round next year to the 3rd round next year. They then selected Brett Smokey to replace Bobby Hill, and then they secured Catolo Catone. Following that, the Vandals, hoping to find their replacement for McDonald with Leonard Church. The Aviators grabbed center fielder Kellen Buchanan. Vandals grabbed Michael Oxhart. Sloths with Refugio Castro, the third of 3 catchers. Voyagers with another batter and Louis Storm. The Crabs, with one of their very few picks this draft, grabbed Justin Moreland. And following him to end the 3rd round was Jimmy Caliburn to the Aviators. The Aviators stayed hot, grabbing Jordan Von Matt. So those 2 picks back to back got a lot of applause from opposing GMs, frustration, as well as a lot of teams were hoping to see at least one of them on their roster, and ended up seeing them both go to the same team, and it wasn't theirs. Following that, the Voyagers grabbed a pitcher in J-Ren Maxon. The Crabs grabbed Phil Blunt. Following Phil Blunt was Jimothy Kecton to the Scorpions, and Eddie Spaghetti to the Aviators. Voyagers grabbed Chase Preza. Scorpions with Martinez Pedro, who was made like 5.5 hours before the draft. Voyagers grabbed Tillywink McTickle-Stick. Crabs grabbed Minor League World Series hero Ben Waters. Aviators selected Jax Hunter, and the Death Valley Scorpions ended the draft taking the final 3 players in the draft: Sidney Swing, Lord Bumington, Cole Davenport, and Aiden Broderick, in that order. Thanks for tuning in. I had a great time. I hope you did too, and I can't say how excited I am for this season. Have a great night.